Thanks for reading the Bible with me. We are reaching the end of the book of Luke. Almost there. We are beginning chapter 23 today, verses 1 to 25. It's a good chunk. Hold on to your hats, though. Lots of good stuff in here. Then the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate. They began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Christ, a king." So Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Yes, it is as you say," Jesus replied. Then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." But they insisted, "He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and he's come all the way here." On hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased because for a long time he had been wanting to see him. From what he'd heard about him, he hoped to see him perform some miracle. He plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there vehemently accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. Dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. That day, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they'd been enemies. Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I've examined him in your presence and have found no basis for your charges against him. Neither is Herod, for he sent him back to us, as you can see. He's done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I'll punish him and then release him." With one voice they cried out, "Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us!" Barabbas had been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" For the third time he spoke to them. "Why? What crime has this man committed? I've found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore I will have him punished, and then release him." But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will. It's kind of interesting, don't you think, that the entire council took Jesus to Pilate? This isn't a prisoner transfer, it's a mob scene. And as mobs often do, they start making false accusations because they know that their real complaint isn't particularly going to bother the Roman authorities. So they accuse him of trying to usurp Roman authority and encourage tax evasion. Lies. They twist his words to make it sound like he's trying to be made a king. Pilate is the governor of the region. He's familiar with Jewish traditions and beliefs, but he doesn't subscribe to them. He's a politician. It's in his best interest to keep people happy and well-behaved. Pilate asks Jesus if the accusations are true, and Jesus gives another one of those answers like he did before the Sanhedrin. Pilate says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus basically says, "That's what you're telling me." Clearly, Pilate didn't perceive Jesus' reply as a threat because he tells his accusers he can't find anything to charge him with. Presumably, Pilate had heard enough about Jesus that he didn't know what to think of him. He certainly wasn't interested in executing such a popular guy when it didn't appear he'd done anything more than ruffle some religious feathers. So Jesus' accusers decide that maybe being louder will help their cause. They start yelling, "No, he's causing trouble everywhere he goes. He started in Galilee." Pilate cuts him off. "Galilee? Oh, Galileans are Herod's people, and it just so happens that the king of Galilee's in town. Take him to King Herod. This should really be his decision since Jesus is one of his." You can see Pilate congratulating himself for dodging a bullet. He never really liked Herod. He was happy to let him deal with this potential hornet's nest on his own. Herod, however, is kind of excited to finally meet Jesus face to face. He's heard about him too, and it sounds like he does cool tricks. Herod's hoping for a show. He starts interrogating Jesus while the accusers shriek their angry lies. Jesus chooses not to answer Herod at all. The time for party tricks was over. King Herod had held John the Baptist in prison for quite some time, occasionally bringing him out to have discussions when he was bored. He was not interested in becoming Herod's next months-long diversion. Herod couldn't bait Jesus into intellectual debate, so instead he entertained himself by having his soldiers dress Jesus up like a king and mock him. The little I've read about Herod was that he was jealous, suspicious, self-important, hateful, so his treatment of Jesus tracks with his reputation. Herod quickly grows bored and sends him back to Pilate. Pilate would still like to avoid executing a crowd favorite during a public holiday that massively inflated the population of the city. That could get messy. He considers himself a reasonable, benevolent sort of guy. In fact, he made a habit of releasing a political prisoner on special holidays just to be nice. It occurred to him that releasing Jesus would both maintain his little tradition and enable him to avoid being a part of what he recognized was not a fair trial. He tries to appease them by having Jesus beaten, horrifically by the way. He was whipped so brutally that his back would have been slashed open till the skin was all but gone, and then released. But that isn't enough for them. They shout that they want him to release some guy named Barabbas, who had in fact started a rebellion and murdered people. To Pilate's credit, he really tries to avoid executing Jesus, but as I mentioned, he's a politician. Job one was keeping his people happy, so while clearly stating that he doesn't find Jesus guilty of any crime, he agrees to let them execute him anyways. This little prisoner exchange in which he frees Barabbas even though we know he's guilty and gives the innocent Jesus the punishment that Barabbas deserved is a powerful representation of exactly what Jesus was doing that day. Perfect, innocent Jesus took the punishment that was rightfully owed to Barabbas, just like he took the punishment that was rightfully owed to every person who ever lived. I've heard preachers say something like, imagine how it would have felt to be Barabbas, sentenced to death because you deserved it, but then Jesus, who never hurt anyone, took your punishment. And it's a crazy thought putting yourself in Barabbas' shoes, but you really don't have to imagine. The fact is, you can pull on your own shoes, because what Jesus did there that day was in your place and mine. It's not just a vivid metaphor. It's a fact.